Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We have Debbie and Anne-Marie from our Canopy Association and Canopy MLS. Wanted to talk to you about the new policy change. Obviously, you've got emails and probably you've seen the notifications on your matrix. Every time you log in, it's there. We got several webinars scheduled and available. This policy is going into effect starting May 1st. I wanted to give you a little bit of background of how the NAR started looking at this, but since we've got Anne-Marie on the call, I'm going to ask Anne-Marie to give you a little bit of background at when it started. Basically, NAR proposed this, and they started implementing this back in November of last year. Am I correct, Anne-Marie?
I believe that's correct, but I'm actually going to defer to Debbie because she's been on the committee that's been involved with this. So she's a little more close to it than I am even.
Great.
Yeah, so it did come up in November at the NAR annual conference, and I actually have a slide that kind of goes into some of the details about what they were thinking about when they chose to implement it. So May 1st of 2020 is the deadline for all MLSs to implement the policy. And the policy, Karush and everyone, is it's here on the screen. It says, within 1 business day of marketing a property to the public, the listing broker must submit the listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage website displays. So that would be like your broker website, could include IDX and virtual office websites, digital communications marketing, and that would be like an email blast, multi-brokerage listing sharing networks. So that could be like a private network of like, I've heard there are networks of like high net worth individuals and things like that, that brokers belong to, but something like that where it would be a multi-brokerage listing sharing network. It could be a private Facebook page where you have multiple brokers being members of that private Facebook group sharing listing information, and applications available to the general public. So that would apply to mobile apps or any type of digital handheld device like a tablet or an iPhone or something like that. And so on the screen, I've got like the basic 3 reasons in a nutshell why NAR felt that this policy was needed. And number 1 is to reduce the number of off-market pocket listings in our current low inventory market. Next was to promote fairness and non-discrimination in housing sales by exposing listings to the extensive MLS marketplace. And then the third is to support the pro-competitive and pro-consumer MLS model of cooperation and compensation among participants. The public marketing of a listing obligates the MLS participant to list the property in the MLS. So when you look at those 3 reasons, I mean, I think probably every agent will agree that in the current situation that we're in, buyers feel like they're not getting a fair chance or a fair shot at the total inventory that might be available on the market because so much is being withheld. And so that's, the low inventory market and the temptation to do the off-market pocket listings for the listing brokers. And, that can lead to the discrimination where, a buyer might feel, well, they didn't get a chance because of, some reason, like maybe they didn't know the right broker who would have been able to lead them to that particular listing. So it does, NAR felt very strongly that this is the right way for the realtor community to go in order to get back on track with, MLS and the whole idea of what MLS is about, which is the cooperation and compensation among participants. So, Karush, does that kind of give you what you're looking for, the background?
Yes, that was great. Thank you.
Okay. So to keep going, I guess, It's possible that some of your agents might have attended one of the webinars. I did, I'm going to run through these slides really quickly, but if you have questions, just feel free to, stop me at any time, and I'm happy to try to answer what questions you have. But, the thought is that we need clear cooperation now even more than ever because, in the current COVID-19 environment that we're in, we still have sellers who need to sell, and there are still buyers out there in the market now who are looking to buy, and I have in my slide when things get back to normal, which hopefully will be sooner than later, but we have to be able to provide service to these people now when they need it. So listing property in the MLS is the most effective way to promote listings to the widest audience. And Canopy MLS is providing the tools that our members need to be able to conduct their business virtually and stay in compliance with the local and stay-at-home orders that are in place in Mecklenburg and surrounding and in the state of North Carolina. So, some of you might have participated in one of the virtual open house webinars that Brian Perkins has been conducting. We also now have virtual showing capability set up through Showing Time. So if you haven't taken advantage of one of those webinars, I would definitely encourage you to sign up for one of those so that you're learning how to use those tools. And then also the members of the NAR MLS Technology and Emerging Issues Advisory Board, which that's the committee that I'm on, they met in late March, and it was the determination of that committee that it is important to maintain this implementation deadline of May 1st, 2020. A lot of reasons behind that, but I think, part of it was that we've had since November to get this done. A lot of MLSs have already implemented it. So out of fairness to everyone, to continue forward and just stick with that May 1st deadline was the rationale behind that. And Canopy MLS, we are complying, but enforcement for fines for violations for the policy will begin June the 1st, 2020. So that is going to allow more time for us to educate our members so that they are aware of the policy and the impact that it's going to have. So we had our Clear Cooperation Task Force, and Karush, thank you for your service in that group. Just for your agents, I don't go into all of this with in all the webinars, but that was 6 long hours over the course of 3 meetings that this group met and talked about like every detail of how we could implement this policy for Canopy MLS to the best advantage of our members, because a lot of the time that we spent in the task force was just kind of questioning and grappling with why are we doing this, and how can we make this work to our advantage as best we can. So there were 12 people on the group. We had Doug Bevington with D.R. Horton, so we had builder representation. Melanie Coyne was our task force chairperson, and Karush. So we had people from North Carolina, South Carolina, the mountain area, large firms, small firms, a lot of broad representation on the task force. And so we reviewed how other MLSs have implemented clear cooperation. There were about 10 that you see listed on the screen, and we looked at more than that, but these are the ones that we felt like their policies had elements that we were intrigued with, there were pieces of it that we liked, and so we did look at everything to try to come up with the best possible scenario for us. And we came up with 10 recommendations that were approved by the Canopy MLS Board of Directors on March the 26th. And I'm going to hit on all of those. But before I do that, so one of the main questions that's been coming up is, does this clear cooperation policy prohibit firm exclusive listings? And we're calling them firm exclusive listings. Now, some of you might be calling them office exclusives. You might be calling them pocket listings, withheld listings. There are a lot of different names out there, but it refers to a listing that's not in the MLS. So this policy does not prohibit that. There are lots of situations. Okay, Karish, are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, yes. I just have myself muted, but yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Let me know if there's any issues with my audio because I have had some shaky internet lately. So, okay.
We're hearing you fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so, but it does not prohibit, you know, pocket listings, firm exclusive listings, because we do have these situations in our market. We have Panthers players, we have Hornets players, elected officials, you know, you name it. I've heard lots of different scenarios out there where there might be someone who doesn't want their listing in the MLS. And, you know, generally those are around privacy issues. So we have to be able to accommodate that. But in the situation where this comes up now, we've got a new form. It's called the Firm Exclusive Agreement. And this was the first recommendation that was approved by the board, that this Firm Exclusive Agreement will replace our current withheld listing form. So your seller will sign this Firm Exclusive Agreement, and it states that the seller nor the listing brokerage nor any other entity cannot publicly market the listing in any way. So, and then also it does explain what can be done, which is the listing can be shared between brokers and licensees affiliated with the listing brokerage, and one-to-one promotion among those licensees and their clients is not considered public advertising. So that's what's going to be allowed under that firm exclusive agreement. So I'm going to show you where you can download this firm exclusive agreement form. We are also in the process of trying to get it added to the ZipLogix, ZipForms catalog of forms for Canopy MLS. So that may take a few more days, but it is going to be put there as well. And also be on the lookout for updates to the listing agreement for North Carolina and South Carolina. So in North Carolina, I know that Will Martin from NC Realtors is working very hard to get that form published in advance of the May 1 deadline. So I think you can probably, hopefully, we'll be able to find that next week. For South Carolina, I am not sure of their time frame, but Byron King from the South Carolina Realtors has indicated that he anticipates that they will be making some changes to the South Carolina listing agreement as well. So something to be on the lookout for in the future related to all of this.
Jackie,
Was there a question?
This is Tiffany Johannes. I have a quick question regarding the firm exclusive side of things. So if I have someone who doesn't want to be publicized everywhere, and I know other agents outside of my firm, can I ask them if they have a client interested without publicly marketing it to them or sending it via email to them?
Once you start cooperating with other brokerages as far as sharing information about the listing, even through verbal communication, that would trigger the clear cooperation policy. So then it would have to be input into the MLS. So we're not saying you can't, but if you do, then you have to put it in the MLS.
So then we would need to have them X through this form so that we would have.
You would, if it gets to that point where your seller is maybe not selling within the firm, and your seller says, okay, let's let you branch out and, market the listing more broadly. We don't care if you do something to nullify the form from Canopy MLS, but you might need to get your listing agreement amended. And in fact, I'm pretty sure if you're using a North Carolina listing agreement, the way that it's going to be set up is you're not going to be able to hedge your bets like you have been able to do in the past, where you've been able to fill it out with maybe a delayed marketing date and allowing the coming soon advertising and withholding from the MLS. It's not like that. You have to pick one. You have to either have it be a firm exclusive listing, or if they want to do public marketing, then you're going to choose the other box, but you're not going to be able to do both. So you're going to have to, if you start with the firm exclusive and then they change their mind, you're going to have to get an amendment to your listing agreement.
Okay, so if you just happen to be out at a party or talking to another agent at lunch and you say, oh, I have a listing at 123 Main Street, it's not on the market. At that point, you've got to list it in MLS.
If by it's not on the market, you mean you have a signed listing agreement for it, but you're not publicly advertising it, at that
Correct.
point, when you start telling other agents about it, yes, you have to put it in the MLS.
Okay, and if I happen to say that at a party or out somewhere and my client doesn't want me to put it in MLS, how does that work?
Then you've got to put it in the MLS. Then it would be a violation of the clear cooperation policy.
Okay, so then even if they don't change the listing agreement, I still would have to put it in MLS.
Well, and you're going to find, let me hold that thought, Tiffany. I'm going to show you how we've addressed that.
Okay,
Because I think we had some good ideas from the task force and from the executive committee and the board of directors on that. So, all right, so to get to this firm exclusive agreement in Matrix, you'll click on the link that says resources, and then when that resources tab comes up, you'll see the link for Canopy MLS forms. But before I click on that, I also want to point out we've got this clear cooperation link on that page that will take you to a dedicated web page where we have posted all of the information that I'm sharing with you in this call. So you can easily get back to this information if you want to refer back to it. So, but inching back up to that MLS forms, when you click on that link, it brings you up to the page in Matrix that has all of the forms that we have created. You click on that firm exclusive agreement form, and then this is what the form looks like. So on the first page, obviously we're the MLS. We're going to explain what the benefits are of MLS. So those are the first 3 bullets. When you put your listing in the MLS, you're exposing it to thousands of realtors, 17,000 realtors in North and South Carolina who are itching to sell that property, right? And then also that listing can go out to thousands of websites. But a lot of times sellers don't want their listing all over the internet. And we feel like a lot of times agents forget that it is possible to have a listing in the MLS without having it go to Zillow and Trulia and Realtor.com and thousands of websites. There are options where that seller can opt out of internet publication and still have the listing in the MLS. So, don't forget that for those sellers with those privacy concerns, that is a possibility. And then the third bullet talks about showing time, that it's such a convenient way to be able to schedule showings for both the agent and the seller to have all of that coordinated. But if your seller doesn't want that, they can still choose to withhold permission for the listing to be in the MLS. They will fill out this form with their name, the address, the name of the listing brokerage, and then on the back, it just reiterates what's allowed and what's not allowed as far as sharing the listing within the firm, that's okay, and that agents within the firm are allowed to share that listing with their clients and prospects. But then what's prohibited is the public marketing. So the seller is going to initial here that they understand that the listing cannot be marketed in any way, publicly marketed through flyers, yard signs, digital marketing on public websites, brokerage websites, email blasts, multi-listing sharing networks, and applications available to the general public. And then below that, they initial that they understand that if that public marketing does occur, or in the scenario like you're describing, Tiffany, that what if scenario of, word gets out, right? Somebody finds out that the seller is selling and a buyer happens to come, that the seller wants to allow a showing for that buyer, but that buyer wants to use another brokerage as their listing brokerage. So in that scenario, the seller is acknowledging, hey, if I want to allow that showing, or if I'm going to get into an offer counter offer kind of situation, then that means that I need to allow this listing to be input into the MLS. And so that's where, especially this one was one from the executive committee. They felt like if you take care of this up front and let the seller know what's going to happen in these scenarios, then that's going to help overcome the objections that there could have been about, not understanding what was going to happen, you know, when these things occur. So, and then finally, the seller then has the opportunity to acknowledge whether or not they want to allow the listing broker to enter the listing into the MLS as a comp sale after it closes. So if it, you know, remains a firm exclusive listing and it closes and it's an in-house sale, then you'll now have the ability to input this listing into the system after it closes, which we have not been allowing up to this point. So we are creating special forms for this, like our unlisted buyer agent sales. If any of you have ever used those, it allows you to input the comp from start to finish and just input it directly as closed without having to jump through all the hoops of updating it to under contract, updating it to closed. And if you had to fudge dates, you know, especially for new construction, you have to get help from MLS staff to fix that. So this will sort of cut out all of those hoops that you have to jump through in order to be able to input that sale as a comp. So your seller will sign this form, the listing agent will sign it, your member participant, broker in charge, sorry, Karush, and then you will send this over to Canopy MLS, and it has to be submitted within 2 business days from the effective date of the listing agreement. So, and that's the second recommendation from the board of directors, was that this form and that 2 business days for submitting the form to Canopy MLS. So, Tiffany, does that kind of answer your question a little bit?
It does, but I do have one more question. That second box in red on the second page, if your seller initials that, I would assume, it looks to me like you could then automatically make the adjustment. You wouldn't have to go back and make a change. Is that correct?
I mean, that's how we designed the form, so that you could go do it. It may be worth your while to go get an amendment to your listing agreement as well, but this, when they sign off on this, and it also says it on the listing agreement as well. So I think you're covered.
Okay, that's just I wanted to make sure in terms of just the technical flow.
Yeah.
To make sure that we're on.
Debbie, if I may, just want to clarify a couple points here. So effective May 1st, the form that, as you know it, the pocket listing form will no longer be available. Using that form will be prohibited. So
right, you're gonna, this form replaces that.
This form will replace the existing pocket listing form.
That's
and
correct.
Something about the exclusive listings. Understand that if you choose to get the listing as a firm exclusive and your seller agrees with the terms and conditions, a couple of things is important to educate them about. We are not going to, the MLS is not going to syndicate this listing information on portals, but other agents from that brokerage can still see that listing. So it's only limited to the agents of that firm. Now, the firm, the explanation of the firm, we are doing business. We have several offices doing business under one ID. So our Charlotte agents will have access to that listing. They can actually see that listing. But another office that is not part of Canopy MLS, let's say a Wilmington affiliates, they're not going to be able to see that. So firm exclusive is only limited to the members, I guess, subscribers within that firm, within that group. The last thing I want to say,
Krish, can I ask you a question now?
Sure.
Is that like a private internal system that you're talking about, that they'll be able to see those listings?
Well, we do use an intranet for our company, but we did talk about Debbie. We talk about firm exclusive. It means that if agents go on Matrix, they're going to see those listings, right? There's an option
we didn't implement that. That was, we talked about it, but the decision at the task force level was that it wasn't something that they wanted to pursue right away. So it may be something that we could, if we are interested in it, maybe 6 months down the road, a year down the road, we could circle back to it. But at this point, they felt that the recommendation was from the task force was that they would not be, these listings would not be required to be filed in the MLS. And from what I remember, Karush, from the task force was there were a couple of reasons for that. One was it made it a little bit easier from a compliance standpoint to force compliance. So if it was a situation where, you know, another agent reported a violation and said that Tiffany is advertising a listing that's a firm exclusive, and they reported it, you know, there's another MLS that I know of that's doing this, and they've said, well, then we just click the button and we make it available to everyone at that point. And the at the task force level, they weren't comfortable with that, with MLS staff making those kinds of decisions and taking those kinds of actions. And then the other consideration was whether or not it facilitated firm exclusive listings, which, you know, we'd rather the listings be in the MLS available to everyone. So I think those were the two drawbacks to it, that that the task force didn't move in that direction.
Yeah, we also had a concern about the office size. You know, we discussed that some of our brokerages, they have hundreds of, you know, members under one office ID, and it will basically just change the whole definition of exclusivity if the listing is shared with 800 people or 600 people under the same brokerage. So I think that was another talking point around that we decided not to automatically include it basically in the brokerage field. But the point I was going to make is about client education, and Tiffany asked some good questions about, can I talk to other people without sharing the information? The point is, I think before we do any exclusive listing agreement, it's important to also educate the homeowner and the client that they have to also follow the same guidelines. So the homeowners can't get excited to put a picture of their listing on Facebook or send it to all of their friends and start promoting it to the public. As soon as that happens and the agent has knowledge of that, you have to change. You have to basically put it on MLS. So that education piece is important. So I just want to encourage everyone, if you're getting exclusive listing, make sure that you have that conversation and understand that no type of advertising, whether it's wearable, whether it's print or media, digital media, is allowed if it's an exclusive listing to public. So that education, I think, is very important for the homeowner, for the seller, because you know they're going to be talking to their neighbors, they're going to talk to their friends, and they're going to start probably sharing some information about the listing that they have. Yes, one thing that we talked about a lot of times, homeowners get excited to try to give it a boost on their social media. That will trigger the Clear Corporation, and if that happens, you have to make sure that the listing is on MLS.
I mean, and Karush, can I just add to that a little bit? I mean, if it's important to advertise a listing on a Facebook group or, you know, get the word out about the listing, then we don't want to prohibit that. We're not approaching it from a perspective of you can't do this. Rather, it's the opposite. It's that we want you to have wide exposure. You know, if you're going to publicly market it, put it in the MLS too, is really kind of how we're trying to couch it, more than a, you know, punitive, you can't do these things. But the other thing is that speaking of, you know, what our definition for as far as brokerage, you know, a firm exclusive for us, and this is some guidance that I got off of the NAR website about Clear Cooperation, that an office is defined as all offices under the same ownership as the listing brokerage and is not meant to encompass brands, franchises, etc. So, Karush, you mentioned to me one time before, did you say you have 8 offices now? Is that right? Or Remax Executive?
Correct.
Okay. So if they're all under the same ownership, then you're allowed to share your exclusive listings, your firm exclusive listings with all 8 of those offices, even if some of them are in Wilmington, right, and maybe don't participate in Canopy MLS. If those offices are under the same ownership, then you wouldn't be in violation of Clear Cooperation if they were. Do you have offices in Wilmington? I didn't realize that.
We do.
You do? Okay. So I hope that helps.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah. Can I add something? It's
Yeah,
Anne-Marie. Can I add something? Yeah, so I want to thank Karish for bringing up that topic of educating the clients, because I think this ties hand in hand with the Realtor Value campaign that the association is doing, and a lot of it is about the value of a realtor and the access to the information that the realtors have through the MLS, and that the MLS should have the most complete data. And a lot of consumers don't realize that the MLS feeds Zillow, the MLS feeds Realtor.com. So the goal is really to enable realtors to have the most amount of information in order to show their value to the consumer. So it's just one more piece that is an opportunity, like Karush said, to educate consumers.
Question? Can we go back to the two-pager?
Sure. Okay.
Okay, I'm not seeing it. Maybe others are. My question is going to be, it appears that, okay, it's not us that wants this. If anybody wants it, it's the seller. And so it's all about having the seller understand, you know, what's good about it being an MLS and what this is going to do. If they say, no, we don't want that, we're going to sign this and, you know, and prohibit that. And it says that, you know, basically we have to cooperate. We have to follow this unless and until it gets amended. But the question is, how does it get amended? I'm not seeing how you undo it.
By undo it, do you mean, I guess I'm
Well,
not sure what the question is.
Okay, if it's put in place and signed down at the lower right-hand corner by the sellers and by us, and then, you know, there's been several questions about, well, what if it comes up, you know, at a party or this or that, or what if the seller is actually the one that, you know, breaks the rule, which appears to me that can get us in trouble, and we'd had nothing to do with it. But over on the left-hand side, it says, if the seller later determines that public marketing is desired, the listing brokerage must amend the listing agreement to obtain marketing authorization from the seller prior to submitting to listing the Canopy MLS. How do you do that?
All right, so this firm exclusive agreement is not a listing agreement. You're still going to use your exclusive right to sell listing agreement from North Carolina or South Carolina. That's what you need to get amended.
Okay.
Okay.
And then that would just supersede this. This would become null and void at that point.
Yeah, we would not need any type of update to this document because at that point you've put it in the MLS. And
But how are you getting that? I mean, you got a legal document here from the seller telling you not to do it. How do you get a legal document from the seller telling you that now you can do it? Is that by having them amend the listing
I know
agreement?
it's a little bit hard because you haven't seen the revised listing agreement yet, but it's baked into the revised listing agreement.
Debbie, is this treated as an addendum to the listing agreement?
You could look at it that way.
Well,
It accompanies it whenever, if you've got a seller who does not want their listing in the MLS and they want to do firm exclusive, you are required to submit this form to us within 2 business days from the effective date.
what I'm asking is on the actual listing agreement where you list any addenda that might be applicable to the agreement, wouldn't you have to put this in there as part of the listing agreement? And then if we have to put it in MLS, we would just initial the change, removing this as an addendum, wouldn't we? Or isn't that how it works?
Candy, I honestly do not know the answer to that question. I would have to check with Will Martin or our legal counsel to find out what their thoughts on that are.
All right.
I don't envision it as being treated like a form from NC Realtors. This is a Canopy MLS form, but I can check on that and find out.
Debbie, I haven't seen the draft of the forms. Obviously we made some suggestions and proposals to the forms committee, but first I want to let you know that Nick and Byron King, they're pretty confident that the new form for South Carolina will be available on zip form by Wednesday next week. So they're working on it to make sure the form is available before the deadline, May 1st.
Oh, that's fabulous. Hadn't heard that.
Yeah, we had a broker briefing yesterday, and they explained that they're working on the form to make sure that it's available before the deadline. Now, I want to just give you this different perspective on this, how you actually treat this versus the addendum in the forms. Think about your agreement. If you're signing an agreement, a listing agreement, a buyer agency, and you check mark basically that you are not going to work as a dual agent, and then later in the transaction, your client, they change their mind, and now you want to participate in a dual agency, you're going to have to go and amend that contract. This is very similar. So you're going to have check boxes on the listing agreements, and if at the time of the listing, if your seller says, I want to only do firm exclusive, and you're going to check box, basically put a mark on that checkbox, and then down the road, the seller wants to put it on MLS, you have to amend that contract. You have to amend that listing agreement. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And that would just render this null and void.
What?
And I've not seen the language yet, but
I have a question.
I guess you just go by the dates.
Sorry, Debbie, I have a question. If we take a new listing from somebody, and let's say it's going to be a coming soon for 21 days, they hop on Facebook to tell everybody, hey, great news, we're moving to the beach. We're not friends with them on Facebook. We have no control over what they put on Facebook. How and why are we penalized or potentially penalized for their actions?
Okay, so I think you might be remembering back when we first implemented coming soon no-show status. We used to say that you couldn't advertise it anywhere other than the MLS, and that changed about a year after we implemented that status. So we don't have any rules that say that you cannot promote a coming soon no-show status listing. So for us, that means you're using the coming soon status in MLS. And as long as the listing is in the MLS on that coming soon status, your sellers are fine with posting it on Facebook and everything like that. But let's say you got a firm exclusive agreement, right? And then they advertised on their Facebook that they were moving to the beach. That would trigger this clear cooperation policy, and then within one business day, the listing would have to be input into the MLS.
So let's say it was going to be
So
longer.
even if,
like we signed a listing agreement on May 1st, our target marketing date was going to be June 1st. The coming soon only allows 21 days. So there's that gap there before we can put it as coming soon. They hop on their Facebook page, and we're not even friends with them, let's say on Facebook.
Right.
We don't know about it. How and why are we then potentially penalized?
Well, because it says it on the listing agreement. Let me get to that. Hold that thought. Let me get through a few more slides, because I think my presentation is probably going to answer some additional questions, and let's circle back. All right, but let me get this out there. So what property types are applicable under clear cooperation? So this applies to all exclusive right to sell and exclusive agency listings. So this was, I think, the third recommendation from the board, that exclusive agency listings are now mandatory for submission to the MLS. For single family, condo, townhouse, lots, acres, farms, multifamily of 4 units or less. It does not apply to commercial listings, rental properties, auction properties, fractional listings, and new construction that is proposed and under construction. So if you have one of these optional listing types and you do put it in the MLS, at that point you're required to report status changes, just like all other listings. But these are optional categories and you don't have to input those listings. So we want to kind of delve a little bit more into the new construction because this is going to prompt a lot of questions. But for new construction, the listing brokerage may submit new construction properties to the MLS that are proposed and under construction that have not received a certificate of occupancy. So may is the key word there. In rules and regulations speak, that means that it's optional. So before you get the CO on new construction, it's optional. But once that CO is issued, then it becomes mandatory. So if there's a signed listing agreement between a broker and a builder and the property's had its CO issued, at that point it's mandatory to be input into the MLS. If it goes under contract before the CO is issued, right, and it wasn't in the MLS, then as long as it's being listed by a listing broker, then there's two options. They can either input it immediately when it goes under contract, update the status to under contract, because they might want it under, under contract show to get some additional marketing, right? Or sometimes the builders, they want it input right away because it's going to help with comps in the neighborhood. But the other option is they can input that listing after it closes for comp purposes. And this is the third comp sale form that we've created is one specifically for builders. So that's what we've got going for new construction. And so here's one of those what if scenarios that we've been talking about. What happens if a third-party vendor advertises a listing without the agent's knowledge? So you do have to instruct your vendors, your photographers, your home stagers, virtual tour providers, someone measuring the house, that they are instructed not to discuss the listing with anyone or post the pictures on Facebook or post them on the Tour Factory website or whatever until that listing is ready to be marketed and the seller is fully prepared, the listing broker is fully prepared to be able to input that listing within 1 business day of beginning marketing. So we have created a brochure for this for agents to be able to educate their vendors. So you can print out this brochure or email it, however you want to do it, but you type in the, or you put in the address of the property, the name of the seller, what that delayed marketing date is, share it with your vendor so that way, and then they are acknowledging that, hey, we understand that this policy says that we're not supposed to be marketing this listing until we get to this date, okay? So hopefully that will help with that. The other recommendation from the board is that the listing submission grace period is changing to 1 business day. Prior to clear cooperation, it was 48 hours, excluding holidays and weekends. So we're trying to be more consistent about using, like terminology. So we're going to say 1 business day. And this coincides with that clear cooperation policy because you have to submit it within 1 business day of marketing. So it made sense, that your listing should be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day of the either the effective date or the delayed marketing date, whichever one rules in the contract. So here's what that rule says. It says the listing brokerage must input each listing required to be submitted to the service after obtaining the seller's signature on the listing agreement and within 1 business day of the effective date, or if applicable, the delayed marketing date, as it is known in North Carolina, or the beginning of the term of the listing for South Carolina. We see those as being somewhat synonymous. So that's how that's going to work. The fine for failure to input a listing that's required to be input into the system is not changing. It's always been an immediate $100 fine, and that's what it's going to continue to be. So the board and the Clear Cooperation Task Force, they looked at what other MLSs are doing. Some MLSs are implementing, I know one that has a $7,000 fine for violations of this policy. So our board, our task force did not want to go in that direction. So we're keeping that same $100 fine. And then also fines are not going to be implemented until June 1 of 2020. There again, to give that extra education opportunity. But it's also not I don't want you to view it as like a cost of doing business. Some people, had the thought that, well, $100 is really not enough. And for some agents, it might not be enough. But the way this works is our rules, if there are repeat violations, they continue to increase by $50 for every repeat violation. And so if there are so many repeat violations that we're now looking at a $500 fine, at that point, it can go to the board of directors for their consideration. And the board
I didn't
can
know
issue,
you wanted me to, so I'm happy to.
so the board can issue violations and fines, much higher than that if necessary. So that's how that works. So we've talked a little bit about the comp sales. You're going to continue to have the unlisted buyer agent comp sales. We're going to rename that selling agent comp sale to be a little bit more inclusive of the different scenarios that are out there. We are going to have this firm exclusive comp sale, which is the new one, where that seller is authorizing you to input it into the system if it does sell as an in-house, which prior to now, we used to say you could not do this. But hopefully before May 1st, we're going to have this functionality input or ready in the MLS system. I know that we're working hard towards it. And then third, the new construction listing agent comp sale. So this one is specifically for new construction to allow builders and agents who represent new construction to be able to input those comps. So with the expanded reporting of comp sales, we are also going to start distributing that information to third-party websites. So you can have them on your broker site, your agent sites, your syndication feeds like Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, all your list hub feeds can have that comp sale data included. And both the seller and the buyer, if it's a buyer agent comp sale or selling agent comp sale, they'll have all of those same options, whether or not to display those listings on the internet. So they'll be able to opt out of that if they want to. And just kind of recapping where you can find links to this information. We also have it under our association news section on carolinarealtors.com. So if you click there, that'll take you to the web page that we've created. So you've got this web page. On this web page, you've got the Clear Cooperation Flyer, our firm exclusive agreement form, recommendations approved by the Canopy MLS Board of Directors, edited rule changes for any of you rules and regs nerds like me. If you want to see the red line version, you can go check that out. You've got cooperation, our brochure that we talked about for photographers, home stagers, and frequently asked questions. So I'm just going to run through these real quick. The biggest question that I have been asked is, what if I already have a pocket listing that the seller authorized me to withhold from the MLS, but it's being publicly advertised? So if you're going to be in that scenario, if you've got a listing now that's being publicly marketed, you've got a sign out front, maybe it's being posted on Facebook or in other places, then it does need to be submitted to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants by that May 1 implementation deadline. So, and that's if you're doing public marketing. If there hasn't been any public marketing of the listing, then you can submit that firm exclusive agreement for that listing. And we would want you to go ahead and fill that out and send it over to us before that May 1 deadline, if it is truly a firm exclusive. So, and these next two bullets are quotes from the revised North Carolina listing agreement. It says that property cannot be previewed or shown by the seller or any real estate agent, including the firm's agents, prior to the delayed marketing date, and property cannot be publicly marketed before the delayed marketing date, except as may be permitted under coming soon advertising. So that goes back to that question, prior to now, our coming soon status was optional. You could use it or you didn't have to if you were doing coming soon marketing. As you could have sent us that withheld listing form. But now, because of Clear Cooperation, if you're going to do coming soon marketing, then you need to be using that coming soon status in Canopy MLS. So, and it does go back to, there's a 21-day time limit on that. But so one of the questions we've had is, how do you deal with that time frame? Like if there's more than 21 days between the effective date, and the delayed marketing date. So, you know, if we use that example, let's say May 1 is our effective date and June 1st is our delayed marketing date. So I think you're going to have 10 days in there that you need to deal with, right? So you could either deal with those 10 days at the front, don't do any marketing in that 10 days until you get to day 10. So maybe on May the 10th, you input the listing on coming soon status, and then you have your delayed marketing date of June the 1st when it'll change over to active. Or the other option, you could put it in the MLS on May the 1st, and then when it changes or after that 21 days, you could do it after it turns active, or you could, you know, you're going to have to go through active status, but once you go through active status, you'd have the ability then to put it on temp off market. So if they still weren't ready after that 21 days, you could put it in temp off market until they're ready to start showing. So those are a couple of the different options. And, you know, a lot of people used to not like to use temp off market because it accrued days on market, but we changed that back in, I believe it was August of this past year. So now temp off market status does not accrue days on market. So hopefully that helps answer that timing issue.
Debbie,
I see Tiffany raising her hand.
So on that, if you have 30 days and you put it coming soon in the beginning and you still have that gap between the time they're ready for people to actually go into their home, could you also use showing time and restrict everyone from seeing it for another 5 to 10 days?
You could.
And no one
that is
knows
totally, yeah, that's an option. I've always said to agents, if you do that, you've got to stick with it. You know, if you allow even one showing for one person but not others, you know, you open yourself up to potential discrimination complaints. But so it's fine to do that. You've just got to stick with it. And I know how aggressive agents can be. You know, my buyers are only in town this weekend. So if it's the same issue with the coming soon no show, that you've just got to make it available to everyone on the same terms.
Right, thanks. I've always told my clients when we do that, if someone's begging, you know, we can make it active, but that means anyone and everyone who's going to wants to look at it can come in and look at it, and you got to get permission. And so I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah. Okay.
A lot of times during that time, Debbie, you know, we're doing all the things, getting staging ready, or getting staging done, photography, repairs, and so forth. So if the seller puts they're so excited they put their house on Facebook, I'm just using that as an example, on Facebook, and then we're forced to put this thing on the MLS within one day, and we're not ready. We don't have photography, we don't have anything done. Otherwise, we're imposed this fine. Am I missing something here, or does it just seem a little? It just doesn't seem like it's fair.
I think that's where that form comes into play. I mean, as long as you're using that form and you're explaining to your sellers, there can be no public marketing of this in advance of this delayed marketing date, because if there is, then we have to submit it to the MLS, and this is what's going to happen. Then that takes, if you're having that conversation up front and they do it anyway, you know, I know it's still going to be awkward, but those are what the rules are.
I understand that you're just following the guidelines and they are. So I'm not trying to beat you up. I'm just trying to find out. There's a million scenarios that can come up, right?
Right.
And I just make sure that we're doing it the right way.
You know, and your initials are CJK, so I'm not sure. What's your name?
It's Chris Kleba. We've talked before on the phone.
Okay, Chris. So, you know, if we're open to suggestions, anytime you have a policy of this magnitude go into effect, I mean, I'm quite sure there will be tweaks to it. So feel free to share your feedback, and, you know, we're happy to consider all the feedback that we get.
I won't be bashful.
Okay. Okay, so this next slide is about compliance. If you need to report a violation to us, we do ask for complaints to be in writing. So we would ask for you to also include some evidence that if another firm is marketing a listing, but yet it's not in the MLS, send us a copy of the for sale sign, or do a screenshot of it appearing on that private network, or forward us the email blast solicitation, and we can take action on that. So the next question, how does the clear cooperation policy apply to builders' inventory homes? We're also marketing our own homes, thus would we be exempt from this policy? So the answer, we kind of talked about new construction already, and it's just a recap here, but prior to it, that certificate of occupancy being issued, new construction is optional. Once that CO is issued, if there's a signed listing agreement with a listing brokerage, then it's subject to the policy, and that information has to be included in the MLS. And but if it goes under contract prior to the CO being issued, then the listing can either be input immediately when it goes under contract, or it can be input after the fact when it closes as a comp sale. But I think the point of this question was, we sometimes have builders who participate directly in MLS. I think Eastwood Homes might be an example. DR Horton is an example. And they're not always signing listing agreements. I mean, why would you sign a listing agreement with yourself, right? If you're the builder, the owner, and you're listing directly in the MLS. So they don't necessarily have listing agreements. And in that situation, they're not subject to this policy. So, most of them, I think, do input their listings though, and the advent of these unlisted buyer agent sale forms that we have now has helped promote builders inputting more of that information, because they want to be in control of the information that's being input. So the next question is from an agent who had their own personal home on the market, and so she wanted to take the listing off of MLS for 90 days in order for the days on market to reset, and she wanted to continue, publicly advertise the home during that period of time. And she says, in all cases, I would disclose that I'm the agent owner. Well, this kind of goes back to what we were saying about whether or not there's a signed listing agreement. So in some situations, it would need to be in the MLS. If she's got, if she has to have an agreement with her firm to do that, or let's say she's putting her firm's for sale sign out in front, then it's giving the impression that it's listed by a real estate brokerage. So in that scenario, yes, it would be subject to the clear cooperation policy, and that would need to be in the MLS system. But the opposite of that would be if she doesn't have a signed listing agreement with the firm, and it's truly being treated as a for sale by owner, and maybe her signage is just a for sale by owner sign out front, and maybe it also says agent/owner, so she's complying with the code of ethics. But in that scenario, it wouldn't have to be in the computer or in the MLS, because that clear cooperation policy is not being triggered because there is no listing agreement in that scenario, and she's not giving the impression that it's being listed by a firm. So the next question was that what if question, that we've got a seller who is out there kind of telling other people that their house is for sale, but yet they've signed that firm exclusive agreement. Word of mouth gets out, and then the buyer comes along. They're using a different firm, and the seller wants to allow that showing to occur. Well, when you are cooperating with agents from another firm, that's going to trigger this clear cooperation policy. And at that point, the listing does have to be input into the MLS within 1 business day. And we tried to take care of that on that form. So those are all of the FAQs that I've been covering with the members. Do you guys have any questions, other questions that we need to circle back to? Excuse me.
I still have one question after that last piece, Debbie. It's relative to, so a seller is out at a party and says, hey, I'm moving to the beach, but the agent hasn't had anyone come to them with a broker outside of their firm saying, we want to look at the house, or we want details on the house. Has that policy kicked in, or has it not?
if the seller's just talking to a friend, but
Right.
it doesn't
So,
result in a situation of there being a showing or a cooperation between the listing broker. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Oh, thank goodness it's Friday. So, Tiffany,
I'm sure you've been talking a lot.
I have, but this hasn't happened. So, I don't think it would. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I don't think it would, because you're not in a scenario at that point of the listing brokerage publicly advertising the listing, right? Or the listing brokerage being in a position of cooperating with another firm. So I kind of wouldn't think so at that point. But
Okay.
I think there might be a threshold there, right? I mean, if the seller is sending out a blast email to 600 people and sharing it on Facebook, yes, at that point, it's definitely, I think, cross the line into public marketing. But just one-on-one conversation between, you know, the general public, I don't see it.
So if they have friends on Facebook and they post, "Hey, I'm moving to the beach," that is a threshold.
That's public advertising. Yeah.
Even if, okay.
Well, wait, saying,
But what if
I
it's
don't
just
know.
moving to the beach, but it's not a picture of their house and all the details with it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have every answer. You know, I can say
Okay.
that there will be situations where it's probably going to be open to interpretation, and we may be having to go to hearings or seeking additional guidance. But it also has to be reported to us, though, right? I mean, we're not necessarily going to know about that situation, like you said, that the seller posted on Facebook. I mean, there's got to be somebody reporting it to us, and I'm going to want to see evidence before I would act on anything.
So Debbie, everybody
Okay,
here, everybody in Charlotte and Lake Norman knows 10 realtors, right? So the seller that's at their neighborhood block party just announced that they're retiring, and we'll use the beach example, moving to the beach. Somebody says, "Oh, are you going to be selling, or you know, what's the plan?" There's a realtor at that party. Hears them say, "Oh yeah, our house is going to be going on the market. We're listing it with Tiffany or Chris Plummer or whoever." Keep it in mind if you know somebody that wants to come in the neighborhood. Have they just broken this clear cooperation policy or whatever?
I mean, so let's scroll back. I'm scrolling all the way back to that first slide. And I'll let you guys tell me, that you be the judge. So it says, within 1 business day of marketing a property to the public, the listing broker must submit the listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage website displays, digital communications marketing, email blasts, multi-brokerage listing sharing networks, and applications available to the general public.
If I was in the hearing, that wouldn't qualify based on that.
I mean, yeah, just reading that, it appears that it needs to be the listing broker that did it.
Well,
maybe I'm reading too much into it, but just the first sentence.
It's definitely, there's been guidance from NAR that these obligations are not just on the listing broker, but they're also on the seller as well. And it also, you know, it could be on the virtual tour provider. It could be on the house measuring company. It could be that if there is public marketing of the listing, that's going to trigger the requirement, not just if the listing broker does it. That's clear.
So what do we do
Okay.
if something like this happens, Debbie, and we're now required to put this property on the market within 24 hours, and we don't even have a photo of the property? I know it's not your problem, but like, can you just give us some advice?
Well, our policy about photos is that they have to be submitted within like 1 business day, 24 hours, 1 business day. So you'd have a little bit of time. You just need at least 1 frontal photo of the property to be in compliance with that rule.
May I ask your definition for the new purpose here? 1 business day is the next calendar day. So forget about anything anymore. It's just the next day.
Yeah, the reason for getting away from like the 48 hours excluding holidays and weekends is that some people are too legalistic when they look at that, and they're saying, well, you know, from 4 o'clock on Friday, and then they're counting 4 o'clock on Monday, 4 o'clock on Tuesday. So it's not intended to be changing to the 1 business day builds in a little bit more leadway, right? So you've got, it's not just looking at that exact point in time. You might have until, you know, 12 o'clock midnight or until the next day.
And a business day is 365 days a year, correct?
No, it excludes like federal holidays and weekends.
Okay. So a listing on a Friday doesn't have to be in until Monday. Just make sure I'm clear on that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So I think that, Karush, if there's any other questions, that is it for me. Sarah.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Karush had to jump off. He had another meeting that he had to join, but he asked me to pass along his thanks for your time and for running through this. So we appreciate that. And if you guys have any other questions, I'll let you email Karush with those because I do not know. And I'm sure he can follow up with Debbie to get any more clarification if you need it. All right.